Then came the advent of community. First, it starts off simple with chat. And a lot of your churches that are typically, if you're doing YouTube Live or if you're doing Facebook Live or some kind of social media broadcast, odds are you might be seeing some interaction there in the chat. That's the beginning of the fruit of community. All of a sudden now you have other believers who are joining together in conversation during the message. My name is Ray Armis. I serve as the online and digital pastor at Christ Fellowship. I've been serving at Christ Fellowship for over 10 years now, overseeing CF online for about 2.5 years. I write for the Church Digital. I co-host a weekly podcast that we put out where we interview different online pastors from around the United States and even around the world to talk about how they are using digital to reach people in different forms and ways throughout the world to make disciples of Christ. And so such a great question. And especially in the advent of COVID-19, so many churches have started to broadcast their services, maybe for the first time. And we started the exact same way. We began with just simply putting our messages out there online, available post-service for people to watch on demand whenever it was need be. Kind of thinking, well, we'll see how this goes, but we didn't really expect too much. This dates all the way back to about 2008, if you will. And then over time, Miami is a very transient city. We're a city where a lot of people come for business and then they'll stay here for a few months, a few years, and they'll leave. But they wanted to continue to stay connected with Christ Fellowship. It was very difficult for them to let go of that connection. And they still stayed connected to us via the internet by watching our services online. And they continued to stay connected with us week to week. And then came the advent of community. First, it starts off simple with chat. And a lot of your churches that are typically, if you're doing YouTube Live or if you're doing Facebook Live or some kind of social media broadcast, odds are you might be seeing some interaction there in the chat. That's the beginning of the fruit of community. All of a sudden now you have other believers who are joining together in conversation during the message. And if you're like me, when you were growing up, your parents probably told you not to talk during church. They probably, told you, hey, wait until afterwards, or you're going to get punished if you talk during church. It's quite the opposite with church online. With church online, you're almost encouraged to interact during the service. And so what a lot of you are probably seeing as folks are watching the messages, as they're watching the worship, they are engaging in the chat in very, very different ways. And we started to see some of the same things. And then the next thing is it started to develop into next steps. We started to give them a place to basically take a next step. Now, some of your churches may obtain data in some kind of way, whether it's a connection card or some kind of data card that's attached to a worship folder or something along those lines that people can fill out and say, today I received Christ as my Savior, or today I'd like to be part of a small group, or I want to be a member of the church. We started to provide digital avenues for that. And then from there, now all of a sudden we had a need for online small groups. And online small groups took on a whole new life of their own. We weren't sure, hey, would people want to engage in this kind of way, in this kind of platform? Would this be something that would take off? And sure enough, we had people who started to sign up for online small groups, and small group leaders started to emerge from places that weren't even located in Miami-Dade County. And so then we started to form multiple groups. And so we were really slower in terms of even labeling it or calling it an online campus. We called it CF Online for such a long time. But then we started to enact different aspects of our church. We didn't treat it as a separate church. See, that would have been a mistake if we would have treated it as its own church within a church. But instead, it became a different version of Christ Fellowship that was available online. It became a campus available in this avenue. And so it slowly evolved into this. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It wasn't something that we just decided. It was something that evolved over time and that we had poured more and more and more investment in. And then came the online campus pastor, somebody who would be there to oversee the relationships and to actually engage spiritually with the people who are there online. Yes. So I would say three main things would make an online campus. Number one would be practical next steps. It's not enough to just give the message. People have to think, they have to feel, and then they have to do something with it. They have to be able to engage with your church. And so having a next step and a place for people to take that next step is very, very important. So making sure and having that on your church website or some other means is very important. Now, some of you may use data forms in some kind of way that are tied back into your database. That is important to obtain data from the people who want to engage with your church. There has to be a way for congregants to engage with your church. Now, once they give you their information, then you've got to help give them that next step. They've got to actually be discipled. And so small groups is a practical next step for them to take. An online community now, thanks to the technology we have, it's never been more affordable and it's never been more available. There's so many different platforms to which you can engage people on, and you don't have to go for heavy, expensive platforms. You can go to the ones that are free and available and are most usable by your people, but leverage those platforms. It doesn't matter if it's text or if it's video, but find a way to disciple them and engage them in regular relationship that goes beyond the message. That's so important, Matthew. It can't just be the sermon. It's got to be beyond that engages them relationally, that starts to take shape with the online campus. And then the last thing is actually giving pastoral leadership. Now, even if it's not a dedicated online campus pastor, which many churches might not be able to take that step, even if it's a volunteer or a deacon or a person that can be entrusted, that we have point leadership that is over this. That is something that is crucial and key and important, because somebody has to be caring and shepherding these people. Somebody has to be looking after them and helping them take their next steps and helping them plug into the life of the church. And so I would say those three things. You need practical next steps. You need community, whether it's small groups or even if you're still doing Sunday school. You can do Sunday school on these platforms as well. That's irrelevant, whether it's small groups or Sunday school, but you need a way to engage them relationally, and then having some kind of point pastoral leadership to help shepherd these people. All of those things are key in terms of developing a solid online campus.